Are you involved in assigning riders to horses and want a clearer, evidence-based framework for making those decisions? Maybe you're looking to develop or refine your program's weight limits policies. In our brand new mini course launching December 1st, we are going far beyond the general equine weight limit guidelines. In 6 weeks, you'll learn how to identify balanced versus unbalanced participants and recognize how that status impacts equine weight limits and overall equine welfare. You'll get equipped to put policies into action and ensure long-term program success. What is a mini course? It's a bundle of comprehensive education that's completely self-paced. Get full access to all course materials for 6 weeks and come and go from the educational platform when it's convenient for you. For just $59, you can join us starting on December 1st with access to live Q&A sessions each week and all presentations, audio, and video recordings. Can't join us right away on December 1st? That's all right. Join us anytime and get 6 weeks of access to all course materials.
Welcome back to the podcast. My name is Edie Godden, and I will be your host today. I know most of you are used to hearing Katie here, and I promise she will be back. For those of you that don't know me, I have been on the podcast with Katie in the past. I am the CEO and as well as an occupational therapist and a CTRI at Hetra. And this is a little different version of the podcast that we're doing today. We're going to call it a short. And the purpose of the shorts are to, number one, be a little bit shorter. We know everybody's time is busy and so kind of giving you some short, hopefully interesting things to listen to that either are covering hot topics in what's happening in our industry or quick tips and tricks that you can put to use in your lessons, sessions, with your horses, volunteers, etc. So let's get started. What are we going to talk about today? So today we are going to talk about terminology, and been a little bit of a hot topic on my mind recently because I've seen a lot of things primarily on Facebook where I see equine therapy being mentioned, and it kind of makes me go back to the thought process of why are we all not using the same terminology? So back in, I think about 2020, 2018, maybe they started a group of leaders in the equine assisted services industry got together. And so people from a American Hippotherapy Association, from PATH, from some of the different mental health therapy type programs all got together in order to come up with some terminology that we could accept as an industry and use throughout the industry. Now, why did they do this? Well, the reason they did this is if you go back and you look at the research, what's been published, you cannot really compare apples to apples because we don't really know what professional was working in that program during that research time. So sometimes things have been called therapeutic riding, but actually had a therapist. Sometimes things have been called hippotherapy. Sometimes things have been called therapy, but maybe didn't have a therapist. So it's really hard to differentiate from a research perspective exactly what professional was involved. So that's one of the reasons that this was developed. The second reason I think this was developed is it's important as we as an industry grow in our professionalism, what we are presenting to the community, to the volunteers, to our participants, to our donors is consistent across the board. So if I say therapeutic horseback riding in Nebraska, that's going to mean the same thing as what's happening in California or Texas. Now, if we think about things like occupational therapy, if I say I'm going to go to occupational therapy, I'm going to pretty much know what that's going to consist of, whether I'm going to it here in Nebraska or in Iowa or in Colorado. It's all going to be this similar type of therapy, right? Now, where we get to a little bit of difference is what do those therapists specialize in? And that's where we're going to dig in a little bit deeper here. So going back to kind of where this all started, when they came up with the terminology, they really broke it down into three main areas. And those three main areas that we're really looking at are the therapy side of things, the learning side of things, and then the horsemanship side of things. And how do we talk about those, and what are the words and things that we should or shouldn't be using? So going back to the therapy side of things, again, I'm an occupational therapist and very passionate about what we do. I've been in the field for 34 years and really love what we do and want to make sure that we continue to progress as a profession, as professionals, as we move forward in the industry. And what I've been seeing a lot, especially on Facebook, is the term equine therapy. So when we go back to a term like equine therapy, let's think about what that might mean. Are we doing therapy with the horse? Is the horse the one receiving the therapy? Because when we say equine therapy, that's sure what it sounds like, that we're providing therapy to the horse. And we know in our instance, in our industry, that is not what we're doing. So let's talk a little bit from a therapy standpoint. What does that look like then? So other terms that we may have heard previously that we're going to kind of talk about is hippotherapy, hippotherapist, equine facilitated therapy, equine assisted therapies. All of those things have been, I think, terms that have been used in the past. So how do we come up with a way to talk about that? And we're globally talking about it throughout the industry. And one way we do that is we put therapy first. And when we put therapy first, that is a way to, again, then define what's happening. So what's happening is occupational therapy. And in the occupational therapy, I am partnering with horses. I might be partnering with horses and doing something called hippotherapy, where I'm utilizing the movement of the horse to facilitate an action or a goal for my participant. Now, I could also be doing a lot of other different things in occupational therapy while I'm partnering with the horse. And that could be a ground activity that I'm doing. It could be activities that we're actually doing on the horse while we're riding. So that looks very different and is going to be very dependent upon what are we working with, what are we working on for that participant? What are those goals that we're working towards? So same thing goes for physical therapy, speech therapy. We're going to always put the therapy piece of that first, and then we're going to talk about partnering with horses. Now, here's a place that I get a little bit sensitive at. And again, when they went together as the group and put this together, I know there had to be some compromises made. And I think eventually this will probably all go back and get looked at again down the road. And hopefully we'll take another closer look at this. But one of the things for me, and I'm sure for a lot of us in the industry, is we want to make sure that our horses are not being referred to as a tool, as a modality, we're using the horse. Those are not the way we want to present that partnership, that interaction with the horse. So for me personally, and for what we do here at Hetra, we talk about occupational therapy. We talk about partnering with the horse to provide a therapeutic activity that is going to help our participants meet their goals. So we try to stay away from that word tool, modality. We really feel like horses are our partners in this work that we do. I know some of the accepted language right now does say that, and I'm going to read it word for word here, so I'm not misquoting, but hippotherapy/equine movement is a treatment tool provided within occupational therapy, physical therapy, or speech language pathology by a licensed therapy professional. So again, we're talking about a treatment tool. We're not necessarily saying the horse is the treatment tool, I guess, but again, that's where I think we need to be more sensitive to that partnership with a horse. So let's keep that in mind. Now let's move on to therapeutic riding or therapeutic horseback riding and adaptive horsemanship or adaptive riding. So that again has been something that has been talked about a lot. How do we want to, what terms do we want to utilize there? And I think the terms that are currently being accepted include adaptive or therapeutic horsemanship. So again, if we can all get on board to using the same language, that's going to help us out a lot. So, and if we think about including adaptive or therapeutic horsemanship as we're talking about things with people in the community, I don't know about you guys, but I've talked to people sometimes and I talk about riding, therapeutic riding, and some people think it's writing, like handwriting. And so we're having a whole different conversation. And so interesting to put that horsemanship piece of that. And really that's where the focus is for adaptive or therapeutic horsemanship. And again, hopefully that's being done by a certified instructor, certified at some level. There's a lot of different certification programs out there. And I think eventually we're going to have to circle back around and talk about certifications, because I do think there are a lot of certification programs out there right now that are not necessarily what our industry needs right now. So we really need to take a close look as you look at those certifications and look at who are those being put on by, what is their experience, what are their credentials in order to provide that certification. It is a kind of an issue right now in our industry because there are so many different certifications, a lot of very good ones. So let me say that, a lot of very good certifications. But for those new to the industry, make sure to take a really good look at that piece of things and make sure that you understand what that certification looks like. So we talked a little bit about therapy, and we talked a little bit about the adaptive or therapeutic horsemanship. And I have to get myself into the mindset of saying horsemanship and not riding, because I tend to say that. So one of the things that we want to be careful if we are providing adaptive or therapeutic horsemanship, that we don't use that therapy piece of language in anything that we put out. And why is that important? Because therapy, again, needs to be done by a licensed professional in their field. Typically, as a licensed professional, we've taken some type of national boards that certify us to do the therapy that we are certified for. And we're also licensed by our state. States require us to do continuing education hours. So again, if we're representing our program as therapy and we don't actually have a therapist there, we have a couple different things that could happen. Number one, we want to make sure that the consumer understands that this is not really therapy. Number two, we want to make sure that they understand that there's really not a therapist there, correct? And number three, we want to make sure that from an insurance standpoint, they do not think that can then be billed to their insurance company, because that therapeutic or adaptive horsemanship is really looking more at the recreational leisure activity of horseback riding. So we could also get ourselves into a situation where if we are putting therapy in our term that, or in our language, that we are misrepresenting ourselves, and we could be looked at as practicing without a license. And none of us want to see that happen. And again, I don't think it's anything intentional that's happening. I feel like it's just more something that happens when people are maybe looking for another word. So I really would refer you back. We're going to put this down in the show notes, this document that talks about what are accepted terms and what aren't accepted terms anymore. And I really hope that people do go back and look at these documents and spend some time in there, look at what you're calling your programming and what's on your website, what's on your Facebook pages, and let's make sure that we can all be consistent about what we're saying. So equine assisted services is still a term that is going to be accepted. And that is going to cover all of the broad areas, including therapy, learning, and horsemanship. So that's the 3 areas they've broken things down into, which I think, again, keeps it a little bit more straightforward, a little bit simpler for us to look at. What are things we want to stay away from? Maybe terms that we've heard in the past, maybe terms that are still present on our websites or in our Facebook, maybe still using it when we give our elevator speech. So again, things like equine therapy, equine assisted therapy, horseback riding therapy, equestrian therapy, equine assisted activities and therapies, equine facilitated learning or equine guided learning, and again, that term hippotherapist. So kind of going back to the therapy side again, I am an occupational therapist. That hippotherapy is a treatment intervention that we as an occupational therapist might utilize when we're partnering with horse. So we are not hippotherapists though. We are occupational, physical, or speech therapists, and we are utilizing that treatment within our plan for our participants. So hopefully this cleared a few things up for people. And hopefully gets people thinking about the terminology they're using, not only in their day-to-day communications, because again, we need to be consistent for our community, for our participants, for our volunteers, and for our donors. And then lastly, for that research, because that research is what helps our industry grow in professionalism. So that is very, very important. Make sure we're being consistent with that language. So appreciate you spending the time with me here today. And I promise you that Katie will be back on the next episode. If you have time, give us a little feedback and tell us what you think of the shorts. We're going to introduce a few more throughout next year. And we hope that you have a wonderful day. And thank you for spending time with us.
That's all for today. But until the next episode launches, scroll down to the show notes and click on the link to get plugged in with us on Facebook, Instagram, or our exclusive educational club at Patreon. This podcast is presented by Hetra University, the educational arm of Heartland Equine Therapeutic Riding Academy in Gretna, Nebraska. Hetra University's mission is to provide high-quality educational offerings to the EAS community. Check out all the Hetra University has to offer at www.hetrauniversity.org.